And we're back. Oh, what a couple of days it's been for you guys. You guys have been at home, doing class, school this way, things of that nature. Me, we were here. I was here on Tuesday. No, Monday was doing no school, and then Tuesday, Wednesday I was here, and then Thursday I'm teaching from my bedroom again, and then I don't know. I don't even know anymore. But welcome back. It's Friday. We made it. Excellent. I do have a few things in store for you today. If you would, as some people have already begun to do, thank you for that. Please leave your comments in the chat. That'd be great. As I kind of stall to allow people to wake up and roll over and open up their, computers and phones and actually get this live stream going. I want to fill you in on what we're going to be doing today. But again, trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, opportunity to get into the live chat. That'd be fantastic. There's only 2 people now. Oh, what has become of our world? I don't even know anymore. But anyway, let me check one thing. Actually, 2 things. And then I want to get started. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, yeah. I was just looking at the roster and how many people we got here. So a couple of reminders before we get started. Obviously, you had your projects due. I'm going to begin looking through those. For those that have turned it in, I'm going to begin looking through those today. Hopefully get you a grade before I leave here today. I don't know exactly how that's going to work out for me. But I'm going to try my best to try and get some stuff graded before I leave today. That'd be great. Again, reminder for those that are coming in, leave that comment in the chat. That'd be great. My goal for today is this. Number 1, I want to give you a little bit more practice with what we started on Wednesday, the Banzaf Power Index, to kind of walk you through what is expected of you. I have a secondary power index that I'm going to be teaching to you as well. Use a slightly different notation, calculated in a slightly different way, but same rationale. The rationale being how much power does a particular voter have? You can't necessarily measure it in number of votes, but there is a way of measuring it in terms of a percentage out of 100. So I want to review the Banzaf. I have a second power index that I want to teach you, and then I want to wrap that up with a quizzes. Now that quizzes is going to be on what we've been doing with weighted power systems, or weighted voting systems, I should say. It's going to involve some of the terminology and definitions that we've been doing in the past, and it's going to have a little bit of Banzaf and this other power index that I'm going to introduce to you today. This quizzes does not count as a grade. This quizzes is merely a practice that I would like to see how we are doing with this information up to this point, being that this is the 3rd class period that we have talked about weighted voting systems. But we'll get that done when we get that done. So, if you haven't left a comment in the chat, please do so. But if you do not already have them out, I'm going to need those notebooks out and open. Wow. Walking over to my desk, hearing my theme music in my own head. All right. What's in the news? Okay. Let me flip my camera over. Come on, camera. Do your job. Excellent. So last class, I introduced to you the Banzaf Power Index. And like I said, I want to go over that with you one more time. And to expand upon that information to a second different type of power index. Probably using the same voting system. Yeah, just to show the comparison between the 2. So double check one more thing. Yes, okay. So today is the 19th. I'm going to put Banzaf continued up here because we're going to be doing these power voting systems. Banzaf, Banzhaf. And the voting system that I would like to look at is this one right here. Here we go. Something very simple, something very straightforward. A voting system in which you need 4 votes to pass a motion. There are 3 players with weights 3, 2, and 1 respectively. No one player can pass anything on their own. Now, when you are calculating the Banzhaf power index, you need to look at winning coalitions. So, first thing that is typically done, and you're going to be doing this on the quizzes as well, keep that in mind. But the first thing that is typically done is you need to list out the winning coalitions. Now, this could be any combination thereof. I mean, no one person can pass anything on their own, so you have to find the combinations of 2 people and 3 people, and if there were more people, that would get you over the quota of 4 votes. So a winning coalition would be everybody, everybody. Player 1, player 2, player 3. There's a winning coalition right there. How many votes was that? Well, altogether, their votes total up to 6. Was anybody critical? Now, this is the key with the Banzhaf power index. You're trying to see who is a critical player. Again, from last class, a critical player is someone who, well, if you removed them from the coalition, they wouldn't meet the quota. If you removed them from the coalition, they would not meet the quota. So, for example, they have 6 votes in this coalition. If you were to remove player 1, they would drop to 3 and thus would not meet the quota. Player 1 is critical. If you were to remove player 2, they would only drop to 4 votes, which would still meet the quota. If they were to remove player 3, they would only drop to 5 votes, which still meets the quota. Player 1 is the only critical player in that coalition. But of course, we have other coalitions to look at. So I could also do player 1 and player 2. I could also do player 1 and player 2. Player 1 and player 2 add up to 5 votes, which meets the quota. If you remove player 1, they drop to 2. If you remove player 2, they drop to 3. Both players are critical in that coalition. You can also do player 1 and player 3. That's also a winning coalition because they add up to 4 votes right on the dot. And both of them are critical because without the other, they would never meet that quota. So then you should ask yourself the question, are there any other winning coalitions? If you did players 2 and 3, unfortunately, you would not meet the quota. So I can't put that down as a winning coalition. In this particular instance, for this weighted voting system, there are 3 winning coalitions, but more importantly, there are 5 instances. This goes back to Wednesday. When we learned this on Wednesday, there are 5 instances of players being critical. Right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, but player 1 repeats. I know. But those are instances with different coalitions. That's a different event that happened. So in that problem, I can say, yeah, there are 5 instances of a player being critical. To finish the Banzhaf power index, I basically have to take each player, like player 1. How many times was player 1 critical? Well, 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Out of how many? 5. Player 1 was critical 3 out of 5 times, which gives player 1 60% power. According to the power index, player 1 has 60% of the power in this voting system. More than half, yes, but clearly not a dictator. Player 2. Player 2 was critical 1 out of 5 times, which equates to 20%. Player 2 has 20% power. And player 3, also 1 out of 5, 20% power. This is how we could weigh the amount of power each player has. Even though players 2 and 3 have different weights in the voting system. Oh, you can't see it's up there. They have different weights. Player 2 has 2 votes and player 1 only has 1 vote. But even still, even with that uneven number of votes, players 2 and 3 have equal power. And that is displayed through the Banzhaf power index. You take the number of times that they're critical, divide it by the total number of critical events or instances, and you figure out their power index. It's a really nice system. It's an interesting system. I have attempted in the past, and I may attempt this in the future, but I have attempted in the past to figure out the Banzhaf power index for the Electoral College. It is a really weird system. Now, I've seen in the back of this class actually comes with a textbook, but you guys don't need the textbook for this class. Not to mention we're trying to, not pass out as many things as possible and take whatever. Anyway, but in terms of the Electoral College, people have done it. People have done the Banzhaf power index for the Electoral College, but the problem is every 10 years, the numbers change and the power shifts. As you know, every 10 years they do the census, and dependent upon the population of a state, it changes the number of electoral votes they have. So if your state grew, typically you would, depending on the proportion compared to other states, you would gain in electoral votes, or in most instances, you would lose electoral votes. You can't go below 3, though. Okay. Now, like I said, I do have some problems with Banzhaf Power Index that you are going to be doing for me in a little bit. But I do have a second power index that I want to introduce to you. And then I want to knock out this quizzes. So, that was the Banzhaf Power Index. There is a variation that is made up, after the Banzhaf Power Index. There we go. Now, I've always mispronounced this depending on the day of the week, but you could always refer to this as the Shapley-Shubik or the Shapley-Shubik. No, it's not Shapley. It's got to be Shapley. Yeah, today I'm feeling Shapley. Shapley-Shubik. It is the Shapley-Shubik power index. This is a different form of power index. It will have similar results to the Banzhaf, but slightly different depending upon how they actually calculate them. Now, the way that the Shapley-Shubik power index works is based on what they call sequential coalitions. Sequential coalitions. Hold on. Sequential coalition's order of voting matters. So with the Shapley-Shubik, you have to imagine that every player is sitting in the same room and they're going to vote, but they're going to vote one at a time. And the order in which they vote matters. So, I mean, player one could always go up first, or player two, or player three. And then if player one goes first, who goes second, player two or player three? One might say, well, it doesn't matter. But in Shapley-Shubik, it does. The order in which they go up to vote matters. So, for example, I'm going to use the exact same voting system. This is the exact same voting system that we just did. 3 players, quotas 4. Check one thing here. Make sure this works. Got to put this here. There we go. So, like I said, the order in which they vote matters. So I'm going to equate the order in which they're voting using a certain type of notation. Now, this notation is technically official. If I were to list out the order in which these players could vote, they could vote player 1, player 2, player 3 in that order. And yes, I use those less than, greater than signs there. They're just little brackets, like special type brackets that you can put around them. Move that over, you see that a little bit better. Now, what's interesting about the order in which they vote is at a certain point, the quota will be met. It's like with the Electoral College. They keep track of the Electoral College over the course of the night, and even though some states haven't voted yet or haven't figured out who they're going to vote for yet, once one candidate reaches the quota, it's over. And the remaining players are just what they are. So in this instance, if you voted in this order, you have to keep track of the total number of votes that could go in favor of something. Could go. So if player 1 voted, there's 3 votes right there. If player 2 votes, that's an additional 2 votes. Now you have 5. Well, lo and behold, that meets the quota. So I'm going to underline player 2. And I'm underlining player 2 because in this particular instance, player 2 is the critical player. Because player 2 puts you over the quota. Shapley-Shubik assumes everyone is voting in the same direction. Everyone's going to vote for something. Which person will put you over the quota? That's what they're really asking. They don't have to vote in this order. They could also vote in this order. Player 1, player 3, player 2. Move that over again so it's not in the glare. They could also vote in this particular order. Again, the order of the voting matters. So player 1 goes up first and votes. That's 3. Player 3 then goes up next and votes. And now all of a sudden, boom, those 2 meet the quota of 4 votes. So player 3 ends up being the critical player. Players 2 vote. Even if they vote for it, doesn't matter at that point. Sorry, you missed out. They already met the quota. It's like on election night, it's like Alaska. Typically, by the time they figure out who Alaska's voting for, they already know who won the election. Typically. Because Alaska and Hawaii, actually. Hawaii are the last 2 states to actually finish voting. I mean, their votes matter. They do. They count towards the total. But in terms of Shapley-Shubik, Alaska and Hawaii would typically never be the critical player. Well, unless they happen to be, like, let's just pretend for a moment that the Electoral College is at, like, 267, and then here comes Alaska to cast their 3 electoral votes, which puts them at 270, then in that moment, Alaska would be critical. So, it could also go, because there are more orders to this than just the 2 I just showed you. Player 2 could go first. And if player 2 goes first, who goes next? Let's say player 1 and player 3. Well, if player 2 goes first, you got 2 votes. If player 1 goes next, you got 5. Player 1 is critical. We could also do it like this. And again, there are actually a few more that we have to write down. You'll see in a moment. But you could also go player 2, player 3, player 1. You could also go in that order. Now, what's interesting about this one, if player 2 goes first, you only got 2 votes. And if player 3 goes next, you only got 3 votes. You have not met the quota. You only meet the quota once player 1 now goes. Player 1 in this instance is the critical player. The entire point of Shapley-Shubik is to figure out, okay, what order are they voting in? Which voter put them over the quota? There are 2 more voting orders that we can do here, and I'll give you like a little formula for it in a moment in terms of like how many there are actually supposed to be. But you could also go player 3, player 1, player 2. And if you went in that particular instance, or that order, I should say, then player 1 would be critical. And finally, you could go player 3, player 2, player 1. And again, in that instance, player 1 ends up being the critical player. Because again, you count the number of votes. Well, down here, player 3 is worth 1. Player 2 is worth 2. You haven't met the quota. You only have 3. You need player 1 to pass that quota. Now, there are 6, count them, 6 orders in which you are calculating the Shapley-Shubik power index. So here's how it's calculated, the little definition. A player's power is the number of times critical over the number of orders. A player's power is the number of times critical over the number of orders. Move that up a little bit. So in this instance, player 1 was critical, and you can check this by looking at all of the underlined. There's the last one right there. You can check this by looking at the number of underlined players. Player 1 was critical 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Player 1 was critical 4 out of 6. Player 2 was critical 1 out of 6. And player 3 was critical 1 out of 6. This equates to, and I'm going to have to round this a little bit, 66.7%. Technically, this is 16.7%. Again, this is rounding, but the rounding's a little weird. And 16.7%. In the Shapley-Shubik power index, player 1 ends up having more power than they did in Banzhaf. But nothing changed. The number of votes didn't change. It's just the way that we measure power. How much power do they actually have? Players 2 and 3, actually Shapley-Shubik showed that they still have an equal amount of power. Very strange. Very strange. I love it so much. Again, just this idea of like, even though different players have different voting totals or different weights, I should say, they could still have the same amount of power. So like a state like Wyoming could have, similar voting power in the electoral college to something of that like I don't know, like Missouri or something like that. I don't know. Even though they have a different number of electoral votes. It's all very strange. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. I know this is the first time you're seeing Shapley-Shubik. I have a couple of Shapley-Shubik questions in this quizzes, along with some of the other definitions that we have done over the course of the past several class periods. Again, this particular quizzes will not count against you. I am going to be assigning you a homework in regards to weighted voting systems. I will be throwing that on Google Classroom before the end of the day. So we're going to get a little practice now, and then there's going to be an assignment for homework that you guys are going to do. And it's going to be wunderbar. Okay. Start a live quiz. Let's see. I'm gonna throw redemptions on there. Yeah, I'm gonna throw redemptions on there. Yeah, that should be good. Continue. Now, obviously, none of y'all can see the code because that bright light is right in the middle of the screen. So I am gonna do two things. I am going to type it into the chat. 720051. Yes, that is the code right there. Of course, I will write it on the board as well so you can see it. I'll write it right down here. 720051. There is my code right there. 720051. I would like you guys to join this quizzes as swiftly as you can so I can get this thing started and ready to go. Like I said, this quizzes does not count against you. It is simply a practice using the information that we've learned over the past couple of class periods. Definitions, terminology, Banzhaf, Shapley-Shubik, all about weighted voting systems. I really got to reinvestigate the electoral college one. But anyway, join that thing up. There's 6 of you in there, although only 4 of you have left a comment in the chat. Who else? Who else hasn't left a comment in the chat? Still waiting for participants to join. Well, this is awkward on your part. Where are all my people at? Are we revealing who is actually with me right now? Are we revealing who's actually listening to this at the moment? It seems to me like that's a possibility. Ooh. Okay. You know what? Ladies and gentlemen, since this is the case, since this is the scenario that apparently you are dealing with me, then I am going to have to take a step here. First, let me turn that off. Let me delete my comment. There we go. Message retracted. Because if I'm teaching a lesson and I see 6 people supposedly watching this thing live, and I emphasize the word supposedly, and I put up something like a quizzes right here, I would have been expecting that people would have been joining this thing and getting the practice as we've done in the past. We've done that in the past. So here is what I have decided to do. Oh, I do see one person in there. Unfortunately, here's what I've decided to do. I am not going to run this quizzes right now. Instead, I am going to assign this quizzes as an additional assignment on Google Classroom. It again, I'm going to stand by that idea that it won't count against you in a way. Like, for example, if you had gotten, let's just pretend on this quizzes that you had gotten something like, a 70, I'm not going to have that 70 count against you. So I'm going to have this quizzes count more on a participation basis, but I am going to put it into Google Classroom as an assignment. And I am also going to be putting in that additional homework assignment as well, the one that I had planned on doing. I do appreciate the one person that signed on to this thing. But I am going to leave it here, actually. This was the main thing I wanted to do today. I wanted to do that quizzes, and then I wanted to review those problems. But since I only had one person out of supposedly 6 watching, I'm going to end the stream here. I'm going to assign that quizzes on Google Classroom with that, with some snarky notes. And I am going to assign that homework as well. So, if you haven't left a comment in the chat, this is your last opportunity to do so before I decide to sign off this chat. I'm saying that and stalling simply because people typically, there's a little bit of a delay between what I say and what they hear. Okay. Thus ends the stream for today. Have a good weekend, everyone.